People often say, knowledge is power. But when you spend your life delving into the darkest and most mysterious treasures of history, you begin to realize that power, sometimes it comes with a terrifyingly high price. Do you know why? There are books that shouldn't exist, words that defy logic, mathematical puzzles from the 16th century that haunt you to the point of being inexplicable, languages that have vanished from the face of the earth, leaving only incomprehensible symbols that torment your mind every time you read or study them. Today, we're not just looking at books. We're opening forbidden treasures to discover 12 cursed ancient texts that not only challenge history, but also drive those who try to understand them. Insane. Our journey into the forbidden begins in the 16th century, in the dimly lit study of a man who was arguably the smartest mind of the Elizabethan era. His name was John Dee. He was a mathematician, an astronomer, and the personal advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. But Dee had a secret obsession. He owned a book that shouldn't have existed. It was a massive, 200-page manuscript known as the Book of Soyga, or more mysteriously, the Alderaya. Now, on the surface, it looked like a collection of magic spells and planetary instructions. But deep inside, tucked away in the back, were 36 pages that kept John Dee awake until the sun rose. These pages were filled with 40,000 letters, arranged in complex, chaotic grids. They weren't words, they weren't sentences, they were a mathematical nightmare. Dee was a genius, but even he couldn't break the code. He became so desperate, so consumed by the need to understand these grids, that he turned to the supernatural. In March 1582, during a séance with the medium Edward Kelly, Dee claimed he made contact with the archangel Uriel. His first question wasn't about the Queen or the future of England. He asked, "Is this book of any excellence?" According to Dee's journals, Uriel's response was chilling. The angel allegedly told him that the book was revealed to Adam in paradise by good angels, and that only the Archangel Michael had the authority to interpret those final 36 pages. When Dee pushed for the secret code, the angel gave a final cryptic warning. The knowledge within those grids was so potent that any human who deciphered them without divine permission would die exactly 2.5 years later. John Dee never cracked the code. And then, the book simply vanished. For nearly 400 years, historians believe the Book of Soyga was nothing more than a myth, a ghost story from Dee's fragmented journals. That was until 1994, when a scholar named Deborah Harkness discovered not one, but 2 copies hidden in the depths of the British Library and the Bodleian Library. The discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world. Modern cryptographers and mathematicians immediately jumped at the chance to solve what John Dee couldn't. What they found was a system of recursive algorithms, a type of math that shouldn't have been understood in the 1500s. They managed to figure out the logic behind how the letters were placed, but the ultimate why, the actual message or purpose of the 40,000 letters, remains a mystery. Is it a map of the celestial spheres? A complex cipher for the names of angels? Or is it exactly what the legend says, a text so volatile that our human brains are literally built to fail when we try to read it? To this day, the Book of Soyga sits in the library, its grids still staring back at us, waiting for the next person brave or insane enough to try and solve the Archangel's puzzle. If the Book of Soyga was a mathematical puzzle, our second entry is something far more sinister. It is a book designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to summon the hierarchy of hell. This is the Grand Grimoire, also known by its more terrifying name, the Red Dragon. Legend says the manuscript was discovered in the tomb of Solomon in 1750, but it claims to date back to the early 1500s. Unlike other magic books that speak of protection or healing, the Grand Grimoire is a legalistic nightmare. It is essentially a contract manual for the most dangerous deal a human can make. It provides step-by-step instructions on how to summon Lucifuge Rohonc, the Prime Minister of Hell, and force him to do your bidding. But there's a catch, a massive one. The book warns that the spirit will not come peacefully. To protect yourself, the practitioner must use a blasting rod, a specific branch of wild hazel that has never borne fruit, cut with a blood-stained blade at the exact moment the sun rises. If you miss a single step, if you stutter a single syllable of the incantations, the book suggests that your soul isn't just forfeit, it is claimed instantly. This is why the Catholic Church and historians alike have treated this text with such extreme caution. It doesn't just offer knowledge, it offers a pact. It contains the infamous, blasphemous pact, where the user trades their soul for wealth, hidden treasures, or worldly power. For centuries, rumors have swirled that the original authentic manuscript is kept under lock and key in the Vatican's secret archives, the Archivio Apostolico Vaticano. They say it's too volatile for the public to ever see, fearing that its very presence could corrupt the weak-minded. But why does it drive historians insane? Because the Grand Grimoire is a psychological mirror. When researchers study the 18th century copies, they don't just see magic. They see a terrifying window into the human ego, the lengths to which people would go, and the rituals they would perform, just to feel a sense of control over the supernatural. Even today, in parts of the Caribbean and South America, practitioners of various folk religions still whisper about the Red Dragon. They believe it isn't just a book of words. They believe the book itself is a living, breathing entity. There are stories of people who purchased modern reprints, only to find their luck turning sour, their dreams filled with shadows, and a strange, sulfurous smell lingering in their homes. Is it a cursed object? Or is it a masterful piece of 18th century pulp fiction that was so convincing it created its own dark reality? Whether you believe in the devil or not, one thing is certain. The Grand Grimoire remains the most feared manual of black magic ever written. It is a reminder that some doors once opened with the right key can never be shut again. If you thought the Voynich manuscript was the only book that defied human logic, wait until you hear about the Rohonc Codex. It is, quite simply, the ultimate, unbreakable puzzle. Found in the small Hungarian town of Rohonc in the early 1800s, this manuscript was donated to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences by a nobleman named Gustav Batthyány. At first glance, it looks like a modest, small book, but as soon as you open it, your brain starts to hurt. Most known languages have an alphabet of 20 to 40 characters. The Rohonc Codex? It has nearly 800 distinct symbols. That's 10 times more than almost any language ever recorded. The book is 448 pages of pure, unfiltered mystery. It's filled with nearly 200 crude, hand-drawn illustrations that seem to depict a strange mixture of religions. On one page, you'll see Christian crosses. On the next, Islamic crescents and sun symbols that look like they belong to an ancient pagan cult. In one scene, soldiers are fighting. In another, someone is being baptized. It's as if the author was trying to create a universal religious text or a massive smokescreen to hide a dangerous secret. For over 200 years, the world's most elite cryptographers have thrown everything they have at this book. Scholars from Hungary, Germany, and the United States have tried to find a pattern. They've looked for a code, a cipher, or a lost dialect of Hungarian or Romanian. But every single attempt has ended in failure. Some say it's a hoax created by a notorious 19th century forger named Samuel Literati Nemes, a man famous for tricking historians with fake artifacts. But here's where it drives historians truly insane. If it's a hoax, it's an impossibly sophisticated one. Most hoaxes are short. They are meant to deceive quickly. Why would anyone spend years of their life meticulously handwriting 448 pages of a non-existent language with nearly 800 symbols and 200 drawings? The sheer effort required to fake the Rohonc Codex doesn't make sense. There's a haunting theory that the Codex was written by a small, isolated religious sect that was being persecuted. A group of people who needed to hide their history so deeply that only they could understand it. Or perhaps it's a relic from a culture that was wiped out so completely that we have lost the very key to how they thought. Today, the original codex is kept in the library of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. It remains a silent taunt to our modern intelligence. Every time a new researcher thinks they've cracked the code, their theory eventually falls apart. We can see the pictures, we can touch the paper, But the message remains locked away in a mind that has been dead for centuries. It is a book that refuses to be read. And in the world of history, there is nothing more maddening than a secret that stares you right in the face. Our fourth mystery takes us away from the dusty shelves of libraries and into the dark, silent chambers of an ancient Egyptian tomb. But here's the twist. The mystery isn't Egyptian, it's Etruscan. This is the Liber Linteus Zagrabiensis, the Linen Book of Zagreb, and it's quite possibly the strangest, recycled object in history. In the mid-19th century, a Croatian official named Mihajlo Baric traveled to Egypt and bought a sarcophagus containing a female mummy. He took it home to Vienna and displayed it in his sitting room. But it wasn't until after his death, when the mummy was being unrolled, that researchers noticed something incredible. The linen bandages used to wrap this woman weren't just plain cloth. They were covered in writing. When scholars stitched the fragments back together, they realized they were looking at a long, continuous roll of linen, a book, that had been cut into strips to wrap a corpse. But the language wasn't Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was Etruscan, the language of a powerful, mysterious civilization that ruled parts of Italy before the rise of Rome. The Liber Linteus is the longest Etruscan text in existence. It's about 1,200 words long, dating back to the 3rd century BC. Now here's why it drives historians absolutely insane. We can read the letters. The Etruscan alphabet is actually the ancestor of our own Latin alphabet. We know what the words sound like, but we have almost no idea what most of them actually mean. The Etruscans left us thousands of inscriptions, but most are just names on tombs. The Liber Linteus is different. It's a ritual calendar. It lists dates, names of gods like Nethans and Vave, and instructions for sacrifices. But because the Etruscan language is a language isolate, meaning it has no living relatives, translating the specific instructions is like trying to solve a crossword puzzle where the clues are written in a dream. Imagine the frustration of a linguist holding the largest surviving piece of a lost civilization's literature, only to realize it was treated as trash by the people who found it later. Why was an Etruscan book in Egypt? How did it end up being used to wrap a mummy? Was the woman an Etruscan living in Alexandria? Or was the cloth just sold as scrap material to an embalmer who didn't care about the sacred prayers written on it? Every year, a few more words are deciphered, but the full heart of the text remains a ghost. It is a literal body of work that was used to wrap a body of death. The Liber Linteus stands as a haunting reminder of how fragile history is. A whole culture's wisdom, reduced to bandages, waiting for us to learn a language that has been silent for over 2,000 years. To the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't an end. It was a dangerous, bureaucratic, and terrifying journey through a landscape of monsters and riddles. And if you wanted to survive it, you needed a cheat code. That code is what we now call the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But here's the thing. Its real name was actually the Chapters of Coming Forth by Day. It wasn't a single book bound in leather, but a collection of customized magic spells, written on long papyrus scrolls and buried right next to the deceased. Imagine waking up in a dark, underworld realm called the Duat, and having to face giant serpents, lakes of fire, and gods with the heads of beasts. Without your scroll, you'd be lost forever. The Book of the Dead drives historians and psychologists insane because of its sheer complexity. It contains over 190 different spells. Some are designed to prevent your head from being cut off, others are meant to stop your soul from being eaten by a creature called Ammit, the devourer of the dead, who had the head of a crocodile and the body of a lion and a hippo. But the most famous and psychologically taxing part of the book is Spell 125, the weighing of the heart. Picture this. You stand in the Hall of Two Truths before Osiris and 42 terrifying judges. You must recite the negative confessions, claiming you haven't stolen, haven't lied, and haven't caused anyone pain. Then Anubis, the jackal-headed god, places your heart on a golden scale. On the other side sits the feather of Maat, the feather of truth and justice. If your heart is heavier than the feather, weighted down by the sins of your life, it is tossed to the devourer and you cease to exist. If it balances perfectly, you pass into the field of reeds, an eternal paradise. What fascinates researchers today is how this text wasn't just religion. It was a survival manual for the psyche. It shows a civilization that was so obsessed with the moral weight of their actions that they literally wrote a textbook on how to justify their lives to the gods. It's a book of immense hope, but also of paralyzing fear. It reminds us that for thousands of years, the most brilliant minds on the Nile spent their entire lives preparing for the moment they would finally close their eyes and open their scrolls. If you ever wanted to know where the line between science and sorcery was blurred until it disappeared, you only need to look at one book, the Picatrix. Known in Arabic as Gayat al-Hakim, meaning the goal of the wise, this 400-page grimoire is a masterpiece of the occult that once terrified the most powerful kings and popes of Europe. Born in the 11th century in the intellectual heart of Islamic Spain, the Picatrix is not your typical book of fairy tale spells. It is a complex technical manual on astrological magic. It teaches that the stars and planets aren't just balls of gas in the sky, but living conduits of celestial power. According to the book, if you can calculate the exact alignment of the stars, you can capture their energy and pull it down into an object, an amulet, a statue, or even a person. But here is why the Picatrix is infamous for driving its readers to the brink of insanity. To tap into this cosmic power, the rituals demand things that are stomach-turning. We aren't talking about herbs and candles here. The book suggests using ingredients like blood, brain matter, opium, and more visceral biological waste to create magical concoctions. It argues that these substances, in their raw and decaying states, hold a unique frequency that can bridge the gap between our world and the celestial spheres. When the book was translated into Latin in the 13th century, it spread through Europe like a wildfire of forbidden knowledge. It became the secret obsession of Renaissance thinkers. They were fascinated by the idea that a human could engineer reality using the stars. But the deeper they went, the more they risked. Historians look at the Picatrix today and see a dangerous crossroads. It was a precursor to modern chemistry and astronomy, yet it was wrapped in a ritualistic madness that could easily break a man's moral compass. It's a book that asks a terrifying question. How much of your humanity are you willing to sacrifice for the power of a god? There are accounts of scholars who spent years obsessed with its planetary charts, only to end up socially exiled or mentally shattered by the horrific nature of the sacrifices required. Today, the Picatrix is studied as a pivotal piece of medieval philosophy, but it carries a heavy shadow. It remains a testament to a time when men believed that if they could just find the right recipe of blood and starlight, they could command the very universe. It's a book that proves sometimes the goal of the wise is a destination that no sane person should ever want to reach. For our seventh text, we move away from the chaos of blood sacrifices and into the terrifying silence of isolation. This is the Book of Abramelin. It's not just a grimoire, it is a 6-month-long spiritual marathon that promises the ultimate prize, a face-to-face conversation with your holy guardian angel. The story begins with Abraham of Worms, a 14th-century traveler who claimed to have met an Egyptian mage named Abramelin. This mage handed him a system of magic that was unlike anything in Europe. But here is why this book has driven so many to the brink of madness. The requirements are brutal. To perform the Abramelin operation, you must isolate yourself for 6 months. Some versions even say 18. During this time, you follow a strict schedule of prayer, purification, and absolute chastity. You are peeling away layers of your ego, day by day, in total silence. The goal is to reach a state of purity where your guardian angel can finally manifest. But that's only half the job. Once you've contacted your angel, you aren't finished. You are then required to summon the 4 princes of hell, Lucifer, Leviathan, Satan, and Belial, and force them to swear an oath of obedience to you. The theory is that once you've reached the heights of heaven, you must conquer the depths of hell to become a complete master of the universe. This book is famous in the occult world because of one man, Aleister Crowley. In the early 1900s, Crowley attempted the ritual at his isolated manor, Boleskine House, on the shores of Loch Ness. But midway through, he was called away to London on urgent business. He left the ritual unfinished. He left the doors to the spirit world wide open without binding the demons he had summoned. Crowley's followers claimed that from that day on, a dark cloud hung over Boleskine. There were reports of strange shadows, sudden madness among the staff, and a string of tragedies that followed everyone involved. Historians are fascinated by the Book of Abramelin because it represents the ultimate psychological shadow work. It forces the practitioner to face their own internal demons, literally. Many who have tried it speak of intense hallucinations, crushing depression, and a sense of being watched by things that don't have eyes. It's a book that teaches us that the greatest power isn't in a magic word. It's in the terrifying endurance of the human soul. But be warned, if you start the path of Abramelin and you don't have the strength to finish it, the book suggests you might never find your way back to sanity. For our 8th entry, we travel deep into the misty highlands of Guatemala to uncover the sacred soul of the Maya people. This is the Popol Vuh, the Book of the People. But don't let the poetic name fool you. This is a chronicle of blood, cosmic trials, and a world where the line between the living and the dead is as thin as a blade of obsidian. The Popol Vuh is the most significant survivor of a cultural genocide. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they burned thousands of Mayan books, viewing them as works of the devil. The Popol Vuh only survived because it was transcribed in secret by a member of the Quiche nobility and later translated by a friar named Francisco Ximenes. Without this single text, the entire spiritual history of the Maya would be a silent void. The book tells the story of the dawn of life, but it's most famous for the epic of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque. It describes their descent into Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, also known as the place of fear. This isn't just a place for the dead, it's a subterranean kingdom ruled by the lords of death, who delight in tricking and murdering travelers. The twins are forced to play a series of deadly games, including a ball game where the stakes are their very lives. They face houses of knives, houses of cold, and houses of jaguars. The Popol Vuh drives historians insane because of its brutal, surreal imagery. It describes the gods trying to create humans multiple times, first out of mud, then out of wood. But these creations were failures, lacking souls and memory. Finally, they succeeded by crafting humanity from yellow and white corn. But there is a darker side to this wisdom. The Maya believed that because the gods gave us life, we owe them a debt of blood to keep the universe in motion. This belief fueled centuries of ritual sacrifice that historians still struggle to fully comprehend. When you read the Popol Vuh, you aren't just reading a myth. You are looking at the red and black ink of a civilization that saw the universe as a beautiful but predatory machine. It is a book that captures the trauma of a lost world and the resilience of a people who refuse to let their gods be forgotten. It reminds us that some texts are cursed not by magic, but by the weight of the bloodshed to protect them. We've seen books that promise riches and books that promise to summon demons. But our 9th entry promises something far more seductive to the human ego: total, instantaneous intellectual perfection. This is the Ars Notoria, or the notary art. Dating back to the 13th century, this text is part of a larger collection known as the Lesser Key of Solomon. But while other books focus on dark rituals, Ars Notoria is obsessed with the mind. It claims that by gazing at complex, psychedelic illustrations called notae and reciting long, rhythmic orations, a student can master all the liberal arts, grammar, logic, rhetoric, even music and astronomy, in a matter of days. It is the medieval version of a limitless pill, promising to unlock 100% of your brain through divine intervention. But here's where the madness sets in. These notae aren't just drawings. They are intricate, dizzying patterns of words, symbols, and geometry designed to bypass the conscious mind and rewrite the soul. The prayers aren't in any single language. They are a chaotic mix of Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and strange, invented, angelic words that are nearly impossible to pronounce correctly. Historians are fascinated by the case of John of Morigny, a 14th-century monk who decided to test the Ars Notoria. He wanted to be the most learned man in his order. He spent months staring at the diagrams and chanting the prayers. But instead of gaining the wisdom of the angels, John began to suffer from terrifying side effects. He claimed the book didn't just open his mind, it broke the barrier between his reality and a world of nightmares. He suffered from vivid, waking hallucinations where demons disguised as holy figures would haunt his cell. He eventually became so traumatized that he burned his copies of the book and wrote his own text, the Liber Linteus, specifically to warn others to stay away from the Notori art. The Ars Notoria drives modern researchers insane because it sits at the intersection of neuroscience and mysticism. Was it an early form of memory palace gone wrong? Or did the intense focus on these surreal patterns trigger a form of induced schizophrenia? Even today, looking at the high-resolution scans of these diagrams is a disorienting experience. They are beautiful, yes, but they possess a geometric intensity that feels wrong to the human eye. It serves as a haunting reminder that some doors in the mind were never meant to be kicked open, and that true wisdom cannot be stolen from the angels, it must be earned. Our 10th text is arguably the most dangerous book ever written, not because it contains magical spells or demonic pacts, but because of the real-world blood that was spilled in its name. This is the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Published in 1486 by a German clergyman named Heinrich Kramer, this wasn't a book of shadows. It was a legal and theological manual. It was the ultimate guide for the Inquisition on how to identify, interrogate, and execute witches. Kramer wrote it after he was kicked out of an investigation for his disturbing obsession with the sexual lives of the accused. He wanted revenge, and he got it through the printing press. The Malleus Maleficarum drives historians insane because of its toxic logic. It argues that witchcraft is a reality and that anyone, literally anyone, who denies the existence of witches is themselves a heretic. It created a world where doubt was a death sentence. The book is deeply misogynistic, claiming that women are naturally more prone to the devil's influence due to their weak intellect and insatiable lust. But the true insanity lies in the interrogation chapters. Kramer provided a step-by-step guide on how to break a human being. He suggested that if a woman didn't cry during torture, it was proof she was a witch. If she did cry, it was the devil trying to win sympathy. It was a closed loop of paranoia where there was no escape. For nearly 300 years, this book was a bestseller, second only to the Bible in parts of Europe. It fueled the Great Witch Hunt, leading to the execution of tens of thousands of people, mostly innocent women, who were burned at the stake or hanged because of the delusions printed on these pages. Today, we look at the Malleus Maleficarum as a cursed text of a different kind. It is a monument to collective madness. It shows us how easily fear can be weaponized into law, and how a single book written by a bitter and obsessed man can tear the fabric of civilization apart. It isn't a book of magic. It is a book of hate that wore the mask of God, and that makes it the most terrifying manuscript on this list. Our 11th text brings us into the 20th century, and it is perhaps the most personal cursed book ever created. It wasn't written by a sorcerer or a monk, but by one of the founding fathers of modern psychology, Carl Gustav Jung. This is Liber Novus, better known as the Red Book. In 1913, Jung suffered a profound and terrifying psychological crisis. He began to hear voices and see vivid, apocalyptic visions of a Europe flooded with blood. To anyone else, this would be a mental breakdown. To Jung, it was a confrontation with the unconscious. For the next 16 years, he documented these experiences in a massive, red leather-bound folio, filled with breathtaking, surreal paintings and calligraphy that looked more like a medieval manuscript than a doctor's diary. Jung would purposefully induce these active imaginations, essentially walking into his own hallucinations. Inside the Red Book, he records conversations with internal figures like Philemon, a wise, winged old man, and Salome. He was exploring the collective unconscious, a hidden basement of the mind where all human myths and archetypes live. But here's why it drives historians and psychologists insane. For nearly a century, the book didn't officially exist. Jung's family kept it locked in a Swiss bank vault for decades after his death in 1961. They feared that if the world saw the raw, chaotic images and the dialogues Jung had with his inner demons, he would be dismissed as a madman rather than a genius. It was only in 2009 that the family finally allowed it to be published. When you look at the pages of the Red Book, you see the struggle of a man trying to hold on to his sanity while diving into the abyss of his own soul. It's filled with intricate mandalas, terrifying dragons, and cosmic deities. Jung himself said that all his later scientific theories, the shadow, the anima, the archetypes, grew out of the raw material in this one book. Is it the diary of a genius discovering a new map of the mind? Or is it a record of a man who successfully navigated a psychotic break? The Red Book remains a powerful, beautiful, and deeply unsettling document. It reminds us that the most dangerous ancient text isn't found in a tomb. It's the one being written right now, inside the hidden chambers of our own subconscious. We have traveled through blood-stained manuals, divine ciphers, and psychological abysses. But our final entry is something that shouldn't exist in a rational world. It's called the Codex Seraphinianus. Published in 1981 by Italian artist Luigi Serafini, this isn't an ancient relic, yet it is arguably the most mysterious book of the modern age. Imagine picking up an encyclopedia from a parallel universe. The codex is over 300 pages long, filled with intricate, hand-drawn illustrations of things that defy the laws of nature. You'll see trees that uproot themselves and swim like fish. You'll see a couple transforming into a giant alligator during an act of love. You'll see machines that look like they were designed by a mad clockmaker, and fruits that bleed strange colors. But here is the curse that drives historians and cryptographers insane. The entire book is written in a language that does not exist. It has a beautiful flowing script that looks like it should make sense. It has grammar, punctuation, and structure. For years, the world's best codebreakers treated it like the Voynich manuscript, trying to find a pattern or a hidden message. They analyzed the frequency of the letters, hoping to unlock the secrets of this alien world. In 2009, Serafini finally spoke out. He told a crowd at Oxford University that there is no hidden meaning. There is no code. The language is asymmic, meaning it is writing that has no semantic content. He said his goal was simple. He wanted to recreate the feeling a child has before they learn how to read. You know that feeling? When you look at a book and the pictures are vivid and magical, but the words are just beautiful, mysterious shapes. Serafini wanted to force our adult brains back into that state of pure wonder and pure frustration. Historians hate it because it's a fake mystery that perfectly mimics a real one. It's a mirror that reflects our obsession with needing an answer for everything. We are so desperate to decode the world that when we meet something truly meaningless, it drives us mad. The Codex Seraphinianus is a masterpiece of surrealism that reminds us that sometimes the most profound thing a book can do is remind us of how little we actually know. It is a portal to a world that doesn't want to be understood, it only wants to be seen. So, after navigating these 12 insane gates, one question remains. Are these books truly cursed? Or is it our own obsession with taboos that has pushed us to the brink? These texts are not merely ink and parchment. They are mirrors reflecting the darkest corners of the human psyche. They remind us that while the thirst for knowledge is what makes us human, knowing when to stop is what keeps us sane. Some doors are locked for some reason. The question is, do you still have the courage to search for the key? Stay curious, but stay safe. See you in the next mystery.